Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we're checking out a total conversion mod by the name of Interstellar Enforcer. If you're wondering what we're doing in this particular mod, well, the clue is indeed in the title. We play as the titular Interstellar Enforcer, visiting various planets and sorting out all of the crap that has gone inevitably tits up. Well, at least that's what's going to be happening in the final version of Interstellar Enforcer, because what we have right here is the demo version. So what exactly does that mean in terms of what's included here? So rather than being able to visit 3 planets, each spanning 4 missions each, the demo version only includes 1 planet and 2 missions on said planet. But don't let that dissuade you, because the 2 missions that are available here are gargantuan. In fact, such is the scope and scale of what's on offer here, even in the first mission, that by the time I actually finished it, I thought that was it. I thought I was done. That must have been the 2 available missions of the demo version here. But no, I was wrong. There was a whole extra mission yet to do, and I couldn't have been happier to learn that there was more for me to discover. But yeah, this is one pretty looking mod. There is a lot of attention to detail here, and you just end up getting really nicely immersed in the environment. Also, not too long after embarking on your first mission, you'll run across these supply boxes, which will give you your flashlight and, curiously, your sidearm, the pistol to be exact. And I say curiously because when you really think about it, what discerning interstellar enforcer would willingly drop onto a potentially hostile planet without a gun to begin with? Apparently this one, but never mind, we have one now. After a little bit of sightseeing, you'll inevitably come across something you'll have to defend yourself against, the first of which being the cutter enemy here, which is exclusively melee-based, comes in 2 varieties, regular and small, regular obviously taking a few more hits to take down, but as long as you keep them beyond arm's reach, you should be A-okay. We've also got the drone enemies, and for the most part, you'll be dealing with the pistol-based variety to begin with, but they do come in other forms. The blue one wields the shotgun, for example, and the red variety wields a machine gun. Now, mercifully, most of the enemies that have the ability to shoot at you here, at least the ones I've encountered so far, do so through the medium of projectiles rather than hit scan. This is helpful because as long as you know where the shots are coming from, you've got a fighting chance to dodge out the way. But this is where the scale and scope of certain parts of the levels here tend to actively work against you. For me, this took the form of enemies being pretty tricky to make out in the middle to far distance, or sometimes having enemies perched atop quite high vantage points. And even though I wasn't aware of the enemies, they still had direct line of sight to me, announcing their presence, often with a bullet directed at my face. This occasional frustration was compounded somewhat by the fact that health here is very much at a premium. Health can only be replenished by inventory items such as medkits and medpacks, or by the rarely dropped stim pack from an enemy, and even then that only replenishes 5 points of health. Naturally, this leads to low health and having to play a lot more cautiously if you want to make it through certain sections unscathed, because the enemy certainly does have the advantage of numbers. The second half of this opening mission is where things get a heck of a lot more hectic, taking away the open above-ground areas and instead putting you in the dark, deep confines of the mine. Hopefully by this point you'll also have acquired yourself some new armaments, chief of which being the shotgun here, which I have to say is the workhorse weapon of Interstellar Enforcer. Hands down one of my favorite weapons to use so far, and it just gets the job done. Not to mention, while also feeling pretty great to use at the same time. So yeah, that's pretty much both boxes ticked for me. You'll find that the shotgun is also a very good friend to have during this particular section of level, because the mines are a nightmare of blind corners and ambushes, and the aforementioned scarcity of health really does rear its ugly head here. With that in mind, you can see why it's very helpful to have a weapon that's very good for snapshot obliteration when rounding a corner and finding an enemy suddenly staring you in the face. I will say that I did find the constant trial and error of making my way through the mines here a fair bit frustrating, and I'm hoping that it's something that the full version of Interstellar Enforcer does something to remedy, because a feature of that isn't available here in the demo is the fact that you can buy additional supplies at an armory. It's the reason why you can occasionally find additional credits on the bodies of enemies, as well as stashes littered around the level, but at this particular point they still don't really do that much for your health at large. In which case, I'd like to propose maybe an increase of the drop rate of stimpaks from dead enemies. That would be a lot more helpful. It would certainly alleviate the more unforgiving feeling nature of playing Interstellar Enforcer, and certainly help the levels to truck along a little bit more smoothly. The second mission of Interstellar Enforcer effectively builds on what the first mission introduced, and doesn't take as much time getting you into the action. But one thing I particularly enjoy here is just this view. It's a real nice sweeping vista that actually serves two purposes. One, it looks pretty, and secondly, it introduces you to where you need to be headed, which is the military base across this gorge. But to get there, you've got to descend down into it, fight your way along the bottom, and hopefully find a way up to the other side. It's just satisfying level design. I can't quite put my finger on why, but it's neat. Another aspect of Interstellar Enforcer's level design I find quite neat, in at least the above ground sections, is there seems to be a lot of emphasis on exploration. More so in the first mission, I reckon, than the second mission, but still, there's great incentive to just poke your nose around and see what you can find. Clamber up on bits of level, go into little bits of cave, and maybe you'll find your way to a secret that gives you a weapon before you normally pick it up. A weapon like the rifle, for example. How's that for a segue? But yeah, even though the rifle dwells in the shadow of the shotgun and it's just raw effective stopping power, it still has its uses. It's very good at accurate ranged combat, and I feel like it could be even more useful if it included something like a zoom or a scope, something I feel that it's in dire need of in sections such as this, because this part coming up right here is pretty much the personification of one of the issues I brought up earlier in the video, and that's the issue of enemies either too far away to spot or too high up to do anything about. And the rock arch up top there plays host to at least 2 drone enemies, and they can pretty much take potshots at me whenever they feel like, while I'm stuck down here dealing with the melee-based plebs. And I figured this section wouldn't be anywhere near as frustrating to deal with if A, I had a scope for my rifle, and B, if I wasn't currently laboring under 3 points of health. That latter fact, I'm sure, is an unfortunate quirk of the demo version here, because the health actually carried over from the opening mission, and because there's no armory for me to buy supplies in, I was stuck starting this mission at a little bit of a, let's say, disadvantage. If you poke your nose in the right places during the course of this second mission, you'll also be able to get your hands on the grenade launcher, which I found quite useful for dealing with these more heavily armed and armored drones. And the interesting thing about the grenade launcher is it actually has different fire types. For the purposes of this section, I just used impact. It hits the enemy, it explodes. Nice and simple. Pretty straightforward. But if you want to get a little bit more creative, you can switch it to bouncing rounds, or you can even set them as mines, which has some interesting implications for future gameplay. In terms of any other weapons available here in the demo, as far as I know, this is pretty much your lot. From the pistol, to the shotgun, to the rifle, to the grenade launcher. Those are the main weapons you'll be dealing with here, and I'm greatly looking forward to seeing what else the author of this has up their sleeve. They've definitely got a knack for some satisfying feeling weaponry here, and I can only imagine how the more powerful stuff in the arsenal here will feel to fire. The second half of Mission 2 has you getting deep into the base and assisting a rather chipper AI who has unfortunately lost control of everything there because those pesky drones have been digging up the cables and pretty much breaking them. So that's where you come in. You are now the repairman. You have to go around patching up these cables and restoring control for the AI, which ultimately leads you deeper below the base to restart a reactor. I will say that I actually prefer the underground section of Mission 2 to the mines of Mission 1, and that's probably thanks to the fact that these sections feel a lot more open than the Mission 1 counterparts, and there's a lot less blind corner ambushing going on, so you feel like you have a little bit more of a fighting chance to just get on with business and shoot some evil interstellar drones in the face. You'll also notice that these underground sections give you a pretty good excuse to actually crack out the flashlight. Without it, the environments are actually pretty dim and dark and hard to see through, so it becomes much more of an essential item than you may imagine. In other mods, I kind of feel like the flashlight is relegated to just a token inclusion. Not a lot of the mods themselves are structured around being able to use it, but here this seems to have definitely been consideration to that end. You'll also notice that it runs on battery power, and this adds a little bit of tension to using it because you've got to reserve it for those real essential moments. What really intrigues me about the use of batteries here, however, is the fact that the flashlight isn't the only item that uses battery power. There's an item you pick up earlier on in this mission called the power gloves, which are supposed to help you lift heavy objects or heavy doors. It's introduced in a section where you literally have to lift a few heavy doors to get back out again, but it doesn't really resurface at any other point, at least to my knowledge. So I'm really eager to see what they've got up their sleeve when it comes to other potential battery-powered items, or at least the implementation of the power gloves themselves. Overall, though, I have to say I'm actually quite impressed with what I've seen so far in Interstellar Enforcer. I mean, sure, I've got some quibbles, I've got some problems with it, there's things that definitely need to be ironed out, but that's the whole purpose of the demo, so that the author can get feedback and figure out what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be improved, and how people essentially play the game. Also bugs, but refreshingly, I don't really think I came across anything completely game-breaking, and I found myself thoroughly immersed in this one. I really did. It did a real nice job of conveying atmosphere, of getting you invested in what's going on throughout these missions through the use of text logs and just generally discovering the place for yourself. And not to spoil anything, but the second mission here ends on an absolute doozy of a cliffhanger that really makes me want to play the rest of it. So I'll be waiting with bated breath, that's for sure, to see what else Interstellar Enforcer has to offer. Very much looking forward to seeing what the rest of the weaponry is going to look like. Very much looking forward to seeing what I can purchase at the armory with all of those hard-earned credits I've been harvesting from the corpses of my enemies. And I'm very intrigued to see what other battery-powered items I'll be able to pick up in successive missions or even on the other planets. I've got some kind of sneaking suspicion that they may fulfill some kind of Metroidvania-esque role where as you get these battery-powered items later on down the line, you may be able to revisit earlier missions and use them to access secret areas. But that's just a tinfoil hat theory. It'd be really cool if it was implemented, but we'll see when we get there. So yeah, that was my experience with Interstellar Enforcer, something I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on for a while. And if you're interested, you can find the link to the demo, as usual, in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits or gain access to new editions of my videos early, you can find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.